Hi guys, and welcome back to Star City Tutorials. My name's Jay Picasso, and today we're going to be looking at mixing drums. So I've had a few emails and stuff about this subject, and obviously it's a little bit difficult to cover because different songs have different drums. However, having said that, what I'm going to try to achieve today is give you guys some basic principles that you can kind of use across all of your songs. Now, there will be a bit of variation and a bit of variety in the way that you use the techniques I'm going to explore today, but of course, as you should know, depending on the song, depends on how you'll use the techniques. So let's just jump into it. I'm going to quickly give you guys a quick play of the song that I'm actually working on. This is a song called Blood, Sweat and Tears by the Immigrants. It'll be out later this year.
Pour a little more in your cup. Let me give you all of my blood, sweat and tears. Blood, sweat and tears. Believe when I say I've got enough. So let me give you all of my blood, sweat and tears. Blood, sweat and tears.
So that is the chorus of the song, sung by Skirmish, great rapper. But anyways, let's move into it. So what I'm going to do now is, obviously, if you're looking at your Logic session or your Pro Tools session or whatever, you should have all your instruments somewhat lined up like I do. Now, I've just colored these because for me it helps me keep everything visual. Okay, so whenever I see the color red, I know it's going to be associated with the drums, and you know, B for blue for my bass, etc., etc. So we are just going to look at the drums today. That's the whole point of us being here. So first things first, what I like to do is I like to just kind of arrange them in an order where I can at least tell where everything is. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the kick, and the kick is kind of like the center of your mix, really, along with the bass. It's actual fact that 50% of your mix is made up of the drums and the bass, literally 50% of your mix. So you got to understand how powerful this is, and obviously the center of every song with drums is going to be the kick drum. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at first. And up here is my kick. It's just a very, very straightforward pattern. It's not doing anything too crazy, but very straightforward. And what I like to do with all my drums, and I'm going to repeat this on every single one, is the first thing I like to do is put them in a bus. The reason being is because I can put certain things on the bus that will affect all of the drums, meaning that I don't have to go and put all of the effects on every single time on every single individual drum. So what I do is, on my kick drum, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the output to a bus, which I've already got set up. It's my glue drum. Okay, now the glue is wicked. If you don't have it, what I'd suggest you do is just find a really nice compression for drums, and you set that up on this channel. Okay, and you do that literally just by, you know, coming down to your presets and uploading one of these compressors and finding something really nice, because essentially that's what this is doing. This is a really, really nice drum compressor, and I do recommend it if you have it. If not, as I said, just set up a standard compressor on this channel and run all your drums through the one channel, and again, it's going to make life easier down the line. So I'll show you the difference automatically. You may or may not hear it with just the kick, but if I play it without, this is the kick without, and now if I put this back on, it's just a bit more of a punch there, really, and that's really kind of what I'm looking for on this particular kick. So what I want to do now is, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the EQ, and we're going to try to do this for every single channel. Okay, first things first. What I have set up is this minus 80 hertz. Okay, I quite like to use it as a preset thing, and the reason being is because most instruments that we mix don't really need things below that, unless, you know, we're looking at bass or particular low instruments. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of anything below 40 hertz on this. Okay, so I'm just going to slide this to the left until I get this 40 hertz come up here, and now that's going to be my mark. Okay, what I can do is turn on the analyzer in Logic if I press this button here, and now I can see my kick drum there. Okay, now if I take that off again, there's going to be a lot more depth to it, but some of that depth is just going to create mud. Okay, and what we want in this instance is a very clean kick drum. So taking off that 40 is quite nice. Now what I've got more into recently is adding something at this mark here, this 200 mark here. Okay, this 200 hertz mark here, because there is a lot of punch here, and although what we're looking for with a kick drum and bass is that low end, oftentimes it gets lost because it's too low. And often, you know, if people are listening on their mobile phones or they're listening on headphones or, you know, some certain smaller speakers, they're not really going to hear your low subbier stuff. So if you want it to stand out and punch through, then what we have to do is we have to attack this area here around this 200 hertz mark here. Okay. Too much and it'll pop out too much. It'll give you too much of the wrong impression, but just a little bit can add quite a nice little bit of flavor, and I quite like that there. And again, your curve on this is up to you, depending on the type of drum that you're using as well. It can be up to you, but adding around the 80 hertz mark, just because again, we may or may not need it. And in my opinion, on this particular kick drum, we don't need it too much, so I'm going to shave it down to maybe about 60, just a little bit off the end there, and leave that like that. And now I'm quite happy with that. So what I'm now going to do is shut that down. As I mentioned, I've already got this going through a compressor, so what I don't now need to do is add another compressor to it. I'm quite happy with that. But what I tend to do, and again, this is completely down to your flavorings, but what I've got set up here is another bus, another channel, which has a reverb on it. And I use this reverb across the board, really, again, just to make the instruments seem like they're in the same space. So by using this reverb, if I add it gently, we can get just a nice sort of edge on the kick drum. We don't want much, because again, adding too much reverb to a kick drum is just going to cause you more mix problems than it's worth. Again, given the song, of course, but generally speaking, it's not a great rule to add loads of reverb to your kick drums. Okay, so now the next piece, the snare drum. Okay, in this instance, I've got quite a crispy snare drum. It's quite almost like a clap, if you like. It's playing the same sort of role as a clap. So again, I'm going to isolate it. And the first thing I'm going to do is put it back onto the drum channel that I had set up here. Automatically, we hear the crispy nature of the compressor that's sitting on that channel. Then I'm going to come back into my EQ here, click my analyzer, just to see what's going on, see where it's really hitting. Now with a snare like this, you've got two kind of ways of working it. If it's like trap music, then oftentimes trap music has really sharp snares, and you do want to keep that. The danger is that you don't want to pierce people's ears, because snare drums can do that, and they are really harsh instruments, and they're supposed to be. But the key is to know where to put the frequency, okay? So what I tend to do when it comes to snare drums is I want to feel that lower region of it as well, and I want to feel the punch of it, not just the high gritty part of it. Otherwise it kind of disappears into more the hi-hat region. So on the snare drum, what I like to do is add around the 500 hertz mark and then move down until I hear what I'm looking for. That's kind of where I'm looking for, more of that crunch end there. So now I'm going to bring it down because I don't want to be too irresponsible with it, but it is nice to have, okay? Just adds a little bit more to the bottom end of that crunch. Now what I do want to get rid of, because obviously the louder this song is that it is going to pierce people's ears if that snare drum keeps going on. So what I'm going to do, and I can see here as it's frozen, is that this area is also quite high. So I'm going to try and bring a little bit off of this sort of area just to compensate a little bit so it's not so sharp in our ears. Again, I'm not going to try and do too much because I don't really want to change the sound of the drum, and you can do that through EQing. If you're unaware, you can change the sound of the drum through EQing, and I'm not trying to do that. I just want to get the cleanest, punchiest snare drum I can out of this. And again, this type of shape on the EQ is really working for me right now. You might find with certain snare drums which are more snarey, as I said, this one's more of a clap, more snarey. You don't need to reduce this area here. You don't need to reduce it. But on this case, and as I said, with certain hip hop and trap music, it's something that's definitely worth considering, and on your claps as well. But we'll get to that later. So let me just close that down, play these together. And I think that's okay. The kick drum sounding a bit poppy, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of reverb to this snare drum now via the bus that I mentioned earlier. And I don't want too much, but just a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to revisit this kick drum very quickly. Take a little bit off of this 200 and maybe bring it down just a fraction. Let's go to about 160 this time round. That's just a little bit better for my ears. So I'm a bit happy with that now. Again, this process as well is back and forth, okay? Once we bring in another part of the drums, we then need to go back and revisit other parts, okay? But now let's look at the next connecting part. And again, you might have several snares, you might have several kick drums going on. So just repeat this process with those things, okay, as you go. What I'm going to add is this clap now, which comes on every other snare drum. Yep. So again, isolate the clap. Bring it to the drum channel. Go to our EQ. This clap is a little bit on the high end of things, but we'll have a look. Yeah, so it's only really ranging in here. There's not much else going on, but I want to bring a little bit out in this area if I can. Now, the thing about this area is vocals tend to sit in this sort of area here. So when you're adding EQ to this area, you will have to review it when you add your vocals, because you don't want too many things interfering at the same frequency kind of sort of area. Vocals, they will extend back as well, but I'm saying that most of the range of vocal frequency sort of sit in this sort of area here. So just be careful when adding too much to that area. But again, I don't want to overcomplicate this, so I think that's okay. I'm going to add a bit of reverb. Okay, bring back in my other drums. And that's good for me for now. So let's bring in our hi-hat. In fact, yeah, let's bring in our hi-hat. Now, this hi-hat is it's a bit of a funny one. I like it because it's not kind of your average hi-hat. It sounds a bit weird. It sounds a bit computerized, but it's kind of cool. So again, same principle applies. Adding it onto the bus that I've put the glue on. Now, what I tend to find with hi-hats is that when you do add compression to them, and naturally, obviously, they're on the high end of things. Again, with certain music, the danger is that you can have too much high end and it becomes piercing for people. So what I do is I add a single EQ, and I can do this in two different places, but I like to do it here for this particular reason. I'm going to add a high cut to it, okay? Which effectively is going to take off any frequency above what I have selected here, essentially, okay? So what I'm going to look for is about the 16,000 mark. Now, literally, if I show you what that looks like on an actual EQ, you know, we're talking above here. That's the sort of area that we're actually touching. So it's not much, okay? It's not much that we're touching, but it does take off that high-end sharpness just a fraction, okay? And again, I want to add some reverb, put it in the same room. Bring back in my other instruments. Now, what I suggest in terms of volumes with hi-hats is that obviously you can have a few, and I've got a few here. I'll bring another one in. But what you want to do is you always want to make the focus of your drums the kick and the snare. Okay, when you've got too many other things going on and they cloud what the kick and snare are doing, you're probably entering a bit of a dangerous sort of territory. So generally speaking, you want to have everything clear, but just a bit giving room to the kick and snare drum, just a bit. Okay, so again, we're going to do the same process with this next set of hi-hats. This is a lovely loop that I got from Stylus RMX, which is a plugin that again I recommend. I personally don't use it for everything, but I think it's really good for filling in some sort of gaps with particularly percussive production. Okay, add in a little bit there. Repeat the process, except we'll do it like on this one, we'll do it like this time round. So again, take out the 80 hertz just because it's not needed at all. And you can see that most of the frequency of this is happening up here. So on here, in this case, that's all I'm going to do. Just take off something off the top. Okay. If I match it up with what I did on the high cut, 1600, about 1600, about there onwards, and that's it. Okay. That's about it. Bring up some more of the reverb. And what I can do for spacing, because I've already got this hi-hat going, is I can now perhaps just pull this slightly to the left or to the right. Okay, I like to put things generally on the left, so I'm just going to pull it slightly to the left just to create a bit more spacing in our mix. Okay. Cool. So let's add the next set of claps. Make a shorter loop. Now, these are a lovely set of claps. Again, they're just looping. I sampled these and then sort of cut the sample and just made it work for me. But again, same principle applies. So I'm just going to add to the drum compressor unit here. Brings it out a little bit more, makes it a bit more clear. In this instance, I quite like these. I'm not really looking to change the where they're sitting, just because I think they sit quite in a nice place, to be honest. But what I can do, anything I like, I want to make a bit more clear. This is the sort of area that I would touch to enhance. What I would say about EQing is that generally speaking, the rule is to cut where possible and not add. Okay, but when we're adding, just add tactfully. Don't add too much, because essentially what you're doing is turning the volume up on a type of frequency, which can be good, but it can also be detrimental to your music. Okay, so just be careful with that. And again, lastly, add in some more of this reverb, put it in the same room again. Now, just to make this interesting, just because this is what I would do, just make it interesting, go to Pancake. It's a great panning tool. If you don't have a panning tool, then what you can do is you can just set the pans yourself. If you press the A button on Logic and come up to your automation, just go to your pan and you can actually automate this yourself if you want to. But with this particular tool that I've got in front of me now, Pancake, it's going to do it for me. And that just adds a nice variety and variation to the mix as well. Especially, again, when I spoke to you about spacing earlier, this provides the exact same thing, and it just makes things seem a bit more alive. Yeah, so let's keep going. Let's add these cymbals on here. Now, these cymbals are particularly trappy and, you know, R&B and hip hop kind of style. They are open hi-hats essentially, and they often fall into sort of urban styles of music. So I'm going to treat them as the same, put them on the same channel. And again, I'm not really going to mess too much with the frequencies on this one because the instrument itself doesn't sound too bad. Again, just look out for the high end. That's all I'd say. Look out for the high end on something like this. But what I will say about open hi-hats in particular is that you do need to consider their volume in a mix, because they're essentially sustaining the part of the hi-hat. And that can be great for certain mixes with a nice reverb on it, but other times it can also run against you. You know, if you're creating this, again, hip hop music, just be aware. It's nice to have it. People won't notice it coming in. You can see on my mix here that it only comes in on the chorus. But I'm not trying to necessarily show it off. It's just another subtle piece of production that comes in. So again, just consider the volume that you've got on this. And I'm going to put it to the right on this occasion because I put the other one to the left. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I've added the reverb. We're good to go. That's pretty much the drum mix. Now, in the instance that you're using 808s, okay, what I've got here is a simulation 808. It's a bass, but it's working as an 808, and I'll show you what it's doing here. Literally not much at all. Yeah, same principle applies. Now, what I've done on here is, again, I've cut that 40 hertz mark here. Okay, what I will do is I'll sharpen it because it doesn't have to be as much. Turn the analyzer on. But what I want you to consider is that, one, we're going to try and treat this in the same manner we would our kick drum. Okay, I'm going to put it up together. We're going to try and treat this in the same manner we would do our kick drum because it's an 808 and that's what it's doing. It's the real low end of things. So again, to shave off that 40 hertz, no one's going to hear below that. Don't worry about it. But what I do want to do is I do want to focus on this 200 region again, just to bring it out so it has more volume, because that's the danger with low things. If you just turn them up here, all you're going to do is drown out everything else in the mix. It takes up so much room because of these frequencies. Whereas if you now delicately work with these frequencies, you can find that you can pop it through without having to upset anything else. Okay. You can also see where these natural spikes are. happening, okay? And that's something, again, that can be addressed in the master, but it's nice to address at this point in time. If you're happy with where they sit, then leave them. But if you think that these spikes are causing you too many mix issues, then just deal with them. And you do that by just making a reduction at the point where the highest peak is. So maybe around this sort of area here. Again, I'm kind of happy with it, so I wouldn't need to mess with it on this occasion. But if you were interested in doing something like that, then give it a go. Now, with an 808, what I would suggest is that rather than running it through the drum channel that's here by itself, I will run it through the drum channel, because it is part of my drums. However, what I'd also recommend is adding another compressor to it, because the compressor we've got at the moment is doing a light job on the drums. It's not doing a heavy job, because we don't want heavy compression. We just want something just to tighten them. Okay, so on this, we want it to be a bit tighter, because those low frequencies can be dangerous and they can consume your mix. Okay, so what I like to do is I'll go to, for example, a preset, let's say bass heavy. Okay, but what I want to now do is I want to keep this meter under this -5 area. Okay, and I'm going to do that by readjusting the ratio and then readjusting the threshold. You notice how it shot up on those particular notes? That's the ones that we're trying to look at, really. That seems rounded. Okay, so the idea is that on the highest notes, we're not passing this -5, and that's, again, to not be adding much compression, but adding enough so it's capturing and it's maintaining the integrity of your bass line, or in this case, your 808. The reason why I say 808 is because I do actually have another bass line running here, which is doing something else entirely. Yeah, so it's the same type of thing, but again, we'd address that slightly differently. But we're not doing bass today, so we're all good. Okay, so after this, we're pretty much sitting in the right sort of area, okay, in terms of our mix. Everything needs adjusting. You need to sort of work things around a little bit. You will need to go back into some of these and then perhaps adjust some of the frequencies depending on where you are. But what I'm going to mention lastly is that some of the things that are not really told to you necessarily are all the things and the effects that go into making your drums and in harnessing how your drums sound. So if I just, for example, if I just mute all of these drums and show you all of the effects that run behind the drums. These are just cuts, by the way. Okay, now I'm going to do another tutorial on these effects and how to use those effectively. But you can see that how, if for example I now play the drums, and we'll take out the 808 for now so there's no tone. That's the drums by themselves. If I now add these effects, listen to the difference. Effectively how we make it work. So as I mentioned, what I will be doing in the next few weeks is putting together the tutorial around the effects that go into kind of making drums and, you know, tracks in general kind of stand out. But I'm hoping that this has been helpful. I know that I haven't touched on everything, and actually what I'm trying to do is make this process as straightforward for you as possible. I know I can babble and waffle a little bit, but I want you to know that there are further things that you can do to drums, and obviously you need to consider the hardware that you run your drums through at times. However, for your average in the box working on a laptop in your average studio setup, this is how drums are mixed, and this is how the reality of putting drums together is. So if there are any more specific things that you want to know about drums, or adding more or anything like that, then do feel free to get in touch. You can email info@starcitystudios.co.uk. Alternatively, you can find me on Twitter at jpicasso. All right, guys, it's been fun. I hope it's been helpful, and I will catch you guys on the flip side. Peace.